Thanks for listening to the Nice Podcast. I am available to deliver keynote presentations and workshops for your company or for your conference. Reach out to me, davedelaney.speaks.com, or email me and we can talk. Now on with the show.
Hey, it's Jason Falls of the Marketing Podcast Network. You know we're trying to bring you the greatest education opportunities out there. We've got another one for you, folks. The Creator Economy Expo, CEX 2023, is for content creators and entrepreneurs interested in building and growing their content-first businesses without relying on social platforms. This year's Creator Economy Expo features 10 amazing keynote speakers and over 30 in-depth breakout sessions. Join 500-plus bloggers, podcasters, authors, newsletter writers, speakers, coaches, and consultants, and freelancers at the learning and networking event for content creators. Don't be left out. Plan to attend this year, May 1st through the 3rd, 2023 in Cleveland, Ohio. Register now and get early bird pricing. And the Marketing Podcast Network has a special offer for you. You can get $100 off using the coupon code MPN100. That's MPN100. Head over to cex.events to register. cex.events, code MPN100.
Nice.
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 Nice. Nice.
Nice.
Nice.
Nice with Dave Delaney.
Today I'm chatting with executive coach, MC, keynote speaker, and the author of the new book, The Surprising Gift of Doubt, Marc Pitman. Marc, thank you so much for joining me.
Oh my goodness, Dave. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. I've been really excited. I know we were just talking a little bit before we got started about how we were both in a speakers group together, we both miss that kind of connection. So it's definitely nice to reconnect with you. We haven't talked in a while.
Well, it's interesting, the power of masterminds or informal groups or gatherings where we can get together with people of like mind and expand. And it's a safe place to let our hair down, but also a safe place to intentionally grow and learn from each other's expertise. It's really great.
It certainly was. So I've been looking forward to this and sharing, mainly want to talk about your book. Obviously, that's why we're here, but the book is fantastic. But before we do, let's talk a little bit about the speaking business. Cause I know we have, fellow speakers and aspiring speakers who listen to this podcast. How have you been doing during this downtime of not traveling and not standing on stages in front of people? How has that been going for you? Dare I ask?
Yeah, no, it's been going. It's okay. Part of it is I laughed about the not traveling because as an extrovert, I didn't realize how much I had really crafted my life to allow my extrovert to get out there and not inflict it on my family. So to be together for a year has been changing, life changing.
Yeah.
But last year, just before the pandemic started, because of the speaking industry, I had noticed that this thing could be bigger than, I didn't know it would be a global lockdown, but, that there were conferences being canceled, early, like in December of 2019, we were starting to hear that. And I ended up going out to do a talk in February of 2020 with an organization, and then having a just kind of business retreat with my best friend out in the Seattle area. And we walked through my income streams and my competency to get them to where I needed them to be for the next year, which is it was incredibly, again, having somebody that you can trust with your numbers is amazing, because I don't share those with many people. But the result of that that February board retreat was not, I don't know how I get speaking gigs. 40% of my income is speaking. I don't know how I get them. So coaching was where I was going to flex most of the year because I know how to get coaching clients. And so when the lockdowns happened, I didn't go into the lockdowns expecting any speaking income, which was a huge win. And I've been doing webinars and online trainings since 2003 in ways that people are shocked. Even if I'm just in a studio recording, people didn't realize I didn't have a live audience in front of me. So, so I have a lot of reps, and I've gotten a lot more reps in the last year from that. But one of the things I did do too, though, during that time speaking wise was, finished my certification for the National Speakers Association's CSP, Certified Speaking Professional, which is the top earned honor in the speaking industry. So I had to look at over all 10 years of the past 10 years of speaking, make sure I had a certain income level for 5 of those years, income level you could live on for 5 of those years, and they specify what that level is. It had all the updated contact information for all the people that hired me so that they could go back and check to make sure I qualified in a certain customer service and expertise settings or whatever their survey, and then submit a keynote and have it reviewed by current CSPs to see if it meets the criteria. And I earned it in the midst of that. So I'd finished the paperwork. And so I was really glad I did it all before the lockdowns because it would have been really hard to keep up the minimum number of gigs that I had to have. It had to be 250 gigs and just, yeah.
Congratulations. That's huge. That's a big deal. Really
a big honor. A lot of certifications are external validation that, are really only important to the person getting certified. But this is one that, I feel like I really have earned, and I've had other people that actually have heard of it, even if they're not speakers, which is intriguing to me because it's still relatively obscure outside of the speaking profession.
Well, I think also part of that process that you went through for that application is something that, nice makers can do especially in a consulting type of role or coaching or something like that, where or speaking, of course, where and I've done this exercise myself of going through, but like formally sitting down, going through your calendar, going through old agreements and invoices and such, and making a full list of all of your previous clients, and then making a note next to them, like for yourself internally, of making a note of how that, rolled out and how it went and so forth. But then finding that these people, I mean, hopefully, most of our listeners have a great track record with their clients like you do, I'm sure. And I have great feedback. But this is a good process to go through people that have hired you before.
Yes.
And then start knocking on doors again. If you find that business has dried up a little bit or things are kind of slower right now, these are relationships that you have. Did you do something like that?
I had
perhaps?
to do so I went back to each one because I had to have the updated contact information, and I was genuinely filled with joy every time I saw some of these gigs because I remembered them. The 2 challenges for me. One, my first book was Ask Without Fear, which was for the nonprofit, for accidental fundraisers, board members and nonprofit the nonprofits needed them to raise money. So many of my talks were to in the nonprofit space, which is all volunteer committees. So they come together to put on an event and then they disband. So it's not like you're speaking with a static person at a company.
Yeah.
For the vast majority of mine. The other thing that I had to avoid doing was saying, thanks for taking a risk on me. Because they weren't taking a risk when they hired me. They thought I had the goods to deliver when they hired me. That's why they paid me.
Sure.
But I know how much better I am now.
Yeah.
And so I had to really, the first few emails, I had to really continue to not hit send and just reread them and make sure that they would still feel good about the choice they made 10 years ago.
That's interesting too, because you look back at your old decks, perhaps. I know I do. And cringe at oh gosh, what was I thinking with this design layout?
But you also, one of the good things, if anybody does this, is any of the listeners, one of the good things I found about keeping my old decks is that I cut out parts that I forget how good they are.
Yeah.
First time or whatever. And then I build my next talk based on the most recent slide deck. And now I'll go back into some that I gave 10, 12 years ago and realize, holy cow, that was a really good bit. I really am missing. I could re-add this. Authors may go through this too. I was reread my book, Ask Without Fear, to write it as, I have a couple of Ask Without Fear for certain sectors. So it's like my Chicken Soup for the Soul. And I was rereading Ask Without Fear, and I kept thinking, I should have said this. And so I was starting to type it out on the manuscript. And the next paragraph actually had that.
Nice.
Oh, okay. Maybe I should just read the book again and refamiliarize myself with what I said, the way I presented it here.
Yeah. That's great. Well, tell me, so how did the idea, so for everybody listening, the surprising gift of doubt, use uncertainty to become the exceptional leader you are meant to be. And I love the book. How did the book come to be?
Well, this is the book that, there's so much of, I had a concise answer and about 3 just kind of railroaded in my brain just now. Sorry about that. My train of thought just collided. It came to be out of a number of different spaces. One thing was, for years, people have asked me, what do you do? And I would say, well, I'm an executive coach. And they'd say, oh, okay. And then they'd kind of process it and their face would crunch up a little bit. Their head would tilt and they say, so what do you do?
Right.
And because coaching isn't consulting where you come in with a formula and this is the formula you do and you start at point A and you move to point D. Because coaching is very much about the coachee, the person being coached and their brilliance and meeting them where they are. My operation has always been, I help people excel and mission, vision, values, leadership. That's always been my space. But when you say that to somebody that has a problem they want fixed, that sounds kind of like you're selling snake oil or, it's all smoke and mirrors because you're just saying, no, trust me, I've got it. So what this was trying to show them in the trust me, I've got it. There's a ton of tools that I use. They're organic. We'll only use the ones that will help you. It's just like any toolkit. You don't always have to use a hammer if that doesn't fit the situation.
Right.
So, I've been trying to do it for about 6 years. I have a lot of discarded drafts on my computer, but when the pandemic hit, my wife and I agreed. She said, this is it. We need to just kind of go full bore into this. This is something we've been trying to have for Conquer Leadership Group for a while. So, she gave me full permission to do that. And, it's been so honoring. It's so well received and it's my 8th book. So when you get excited as an author with your 8th book, it says something to me anyway, because the team at Page 2 Publishing, edited a book that I enjoy reading too, which is really, really cool.
Yeah. Yeah. And Page 2 are fantastic.
Yeah.
We're actually chatting now.
Good.
Yeah. Yeah. And so tell me about your relationship with your wife in that way. Like, how is she, what's her name again? I'm sorry.
Emily.
Right.
So Emily and I, we got married right out of college and whenever people hear our life story, they hear it as the word intentional. You both are intentional comes up a lot, because we did things like we left a job. A job I loved, but it was taking me away from home and we had gotten married to do life together. And it was causing us to not do life together anymore. It was causing us to move on 2 separate kind of paths. So we moved to a boarding school campus where we were dorm parents and, she was a dorm mom for 40 teenage girls and I was doing faculty work, there. And we had, sit down dinners because that was kind of the life community that we wanted. So we did things very intentionally and she is, an amazing, just litmus test of ideas. She was really annoyed when I branded as fundraising coach because she knew I was bigger than that. She has known all along that I've been a leadership guy. I knew that fundraising had the ROI implied in it. If you said fundraising, people would, if I hire him, he's going to, increase my revenue. So, so this book too is also something that is a testament to what she has known for 20 years. This is what you offer. You help people that are struggling with that, help them get out of it. And you help leaders that have already experienced success that nobody else seems to think they need coaching or help. You're a safe person to help them. Yeah.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah. And part of the reason why I asked too is, Heather, my wife has been such a support with everything I do. And so she definitely, when I was writing my first book, and for those, those who don't maybe have a book yet, you might realize that there is a little bit of self-doubt when you're writing a book, which we're going to talk about. And she definitely talked me off the roof multiple times. So.
Oh, that's so helpful.
Yeah, big time. So let me ask you very quickly, what is the nicest thing someone has done for you recently?
Well, we're in this midst right now of, at the time of this recording, my wife just had a major surgery on her foot or her leg. And it was the first major surgery in our 26 years of marriage for either of us outside of childbirth. So not that was surgery, but it was medical.
Yeah, sure.
So I think that what we've been surprised by is the families that are bringing over meals and flowers and sending us cookies and stuff. We're both firstborn New Englanders. And so I have a hard time when our pastor reached out and she asked me, what can we bring? Or how can we help? my knee jerk reaction is always, I can do it myself. Pull myself up on my bootstraps. And I actually prepared the kids too, just to let them know that, families from the church are going to be bringing over meals. Mm-hmm. Just so you know that, and whether we need it or not, it is a right thing for us to receive it. Well, we haven't realized how we're at the end of that first wave of meals, and it's kind of, we're just realizing how nice it was to know that every other day or so, we weren't going to have to think about meal prep. So that's probably the nicest. And it's hard because it's not a comfortable place to be, to have that, for me to ask for help. I love asking people, what do you need? How can I help? How can I support you?
Yeah.
But to be the one that's on the receiving end, is still something I need to, I guess I need to grow more in, which sounds so self-serving.
Well, no.
I need to be receiving more.
Yeah. No, but I think when this gets back to actually the first episode of this podcast, I interviewed Chris Brogan, and we talked about how he dislikes the phrase, how can I help you? Because instead it's better to find a way to help someone and offer that, or even just provide it. So in this case, and in this example, I mean, your folks there knew that you needed, this is what you were going to need during this time. And so they went out of their way to provide it.
Well,
so
and somebody just asked
idea.
Also, how can I help you over the weekend? And it was fun it was exactly that. I don't know, but but at least I could say, but families have been, providing meals and sending flowers. And those have been remarkable. One of the things I did tell our kids was, we may not like the food and we can throw it away. We will give ourselves permission to freeze it or throw it away, depending on whether
right. Yeah.
So that it allowed them to receive it with more open hands too. Cause, it's something about receiving somebody else's generosity. My whole career has been helping people be generous to causes that they support. Yeah. Or to, teams that they have built up as entrepreneurs. So to receive it is something that is, it's a different muscle to flex for sure.
Hey, you're listening to the Nice Podcast with Dave Delaney. That's me. Visit Futureforth.com to learn how we can transform the communication at your organization. And if you need a speaker for your next online event or your in-person conference, are we doing in-person conferences yet? Soon, I hope. You can visit DaveDelaneySpeaks.com and you'll learn more about working with me there. All right, let's get back to the show. How old are your kids?
They change every year. Hold on. Which is good. That's the goal. 21, almost 19 and just turned 16.
Okay. Wow. Wow. So 21. So so there is a light at the end.
2 in college, 1 in high school.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Cause my kids are 14 and 15 and help me. Please help me.
They keep getting more and more fun the older they get.
Yeah, that's what I hear. That's what and I guess for you and Emily managing, you mentioned what was 40 teenage girls? Is that what you said?
Yeah, we felt like we get to cut our teeth in parenting before actually having our own.
I can't imagine that drama. I can't imagine it. All right.
We homeschooled as well. So up until last year. So Emily was running our school for all 3 of them. And we never, even though we had told people we wanted to do that, nobody ever suggested having them a little closer together so that you could kind of do curriculum together. So she had specific, like high school, middle school, elementary, just very specific different curriculum to create.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I can't imagine.
I guess to create that curriculum. Yeah.
Yeah. Our kids are Irish twins. So they're 11 and a half months
My
apart.
sister and I are Irish twins too.
Oh, you are?
Yeah.
Are you guys?
I knew about.
Are you guys
23andMe showed me that I had another sister. So yes, we're all close, all 3 of us. But the one I grew up with, we were quite close. Until there was a point where we were antagonistic to each other, and then we realized, wait, this is dumb. We actually enjoy each other. So can we just be friends again? Instead of brothers and sisters? Yeah. I remember sitting on our steps having that conversation together.
That's great. Yeah. When we got pregnant the second time, a lot of people were saying, yeah, those are Irish twins, or we had a podcast back then. It was 2005 about parenting. And so we had a lot of listeners saying, "Oh, Irish twins, that's going to be great. I mean, it's going to be really hard for the first year or two. And then after that, it gets easier and easier." And it's true. Like they experienced everything together. So Disney was Disney. It was just as magical for both of them.
Yeah.
And things like that. So, and they are very close. Still they're
I guess
close.
I have to be in full disclosure. My sister is a year and 11 days after me. So we're honorary Irish twins. We don't quite make it in there. Sorry. I mean, I think in case any real Irish twins are wanting to keep score.
You're good. You're good. Yeah.
It's like, I'm not really from Maine because I moved to Maine at 6 months after I was born. So I'm from away still.
Well, yeah, both my kids are from Toronto. I mean, they're both born in Toronto, but they've spent, 90% of their lives or more here in Nashville. So, they're strange sounding Canadians.
That's awesome.
So you opened your book with a note on privilege, which is something I haven't seen before and something that's quite timely, of course. Did you want, I thought that was such a great gesture, a great thing to do. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah. So I've spoken up for equality, and back when high school, in my church tradition, I was very much about biblical equality, and I've been a feminist, that just, I guess, unassuming feminist, but I've been very vocal about, equality, but I've learned a lot more about equity, since 2016 was where I had to take a crash course in racial equity and systemic injustice. Along those kind of just the learning process that I'm learning, the other conversations that I was seeing, and I noted in the book, is this Twitter thread that was a bunch of women that were just tired of white men that clearly didn't have any house or child responsibilities, writing books on time management and goal setting. And the pile-on effect of that really hit at the core of me, because I was in the process of writing a book on leadership and goal setting and all. And then the murder of George Floyd also, of course, how it was an awareness of the kind of the disproportionate take on life that white men tend to have. And I guess it was also, the third part was a great podcast called By the Book, where the two, Kristen and Jolenta, the two hosts, take a self-help book and live it by the book for 2 weeks. And so they've been doing this for 4 years now, and just hearing some of their, as women and women of color, and there's just a different perspective about how white men kind of seem like the systems have been in our favor for so many centuries, that when we realize we're not the center of the universe, we tend to write a book. There are the books that come out of that tend to be white men realizing, oh, the world doesn't revolve around me, and here's what I've learned. As though nobody else knew that. As though women in misogynistic cultures didn't know that. And as though people of color and white supremacist cultures didn't realize that.
Right.
And we're the only ones that have had the privilege of not knowing that you had to bend and shift and adapt. So writing the book, writing that note on privilege was also a way of kind of modeling my process where I'm at. But part of the process of doing that was hiring or offering to hire 12 different editors to, after I had gone through with page 2 of my publishing team, just putting it out to people that were not white men, or straight white men. There was one gay, friend of mine, and just say, is this as accessible to a wide, as diverse an audience as I think it is? And it was so helpful, Dave, to have all that input, to have some of the blind spots. Mostly it was pop culture references. I referenced a lot of 80s movies and all that were just basic. One of my Indian friends said, "You're just whitey, white, old man, white." So to realize, to be able to tease with integrity some of the more references that would also speak to a wider audience was good. Like I had a Native American person really go through this with me, and Smoke Signals, I guess, is a movie that would have been very good if I had known, but there was no authenticity at all. I'm talking about how I've coached people for 18 years, and if I watched Smoke Signals, and then 18 minutes later we're talking about it as though it were one of my stock movies, that is not the me that I present. That's just not how I am. I want to be authentic.
Right. Yeah.
So we used other references, but it was really good to get to also get the affirmation. So as the culture continues to grow and awareness of, in different sectors that haven't normally been aware of systemic inequity grow, there's also a sense of solidity or security I have in the book that this is past some really vocal advocates for diversity, inclusion, and equity, that it's already had that look, which I'm really honored that they took the time to do that with.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And something, yeah, I regret not doing that with my book now that you mention it. And,
I was honored by how open people were, because it's awkward to ask. Like,
yeah,
I'm not tokenizing, but I want to ask you because you're not white to look at something that this white guy wrote. But people were they were very open to it. They were very pointed. And as an author, I was really glad that pointed when they needed to be, but I was really glad that all of the comments that they gave me, we were able to have conversation about, as opposed to me reading on an Amazon review.
Mm-hmm.
And so I could fix and adapt and change some things. And I didn't do everything that they wanted. There was some more inclusiveness stuff where most of the points in the book are illustrated by stories of people I've worked with. And, one person had suggested I put a lot more labels on them about the different, how they were different or non-neurotypical or whatever. And it would have just distracted from the story. Yeah. So I was able to choose to pull back on some areas. But it was really helpful.
Yeah, I'm just, as another white male, I'm just really glad that you kept all the references to the Dukes of Hazzard in there. No, I'm just joking, people.
What? That would never. I was from Maine. We didn't even watch that. My parents. I think it was probably because. Well, I know Boss Hogg, but yeah, I think Daisy was a little bit too scantily dressed, so we weren't allowed to watch that.
Man, I watched that growing up, and I had, being Canadian, and that was like, if I ever saw the Confederate flag, it was instantly just associating it with my like childhood of watching Dukes of Hazzard. I think I probably even had the toy car without even really realizing, the full
implications of that. Yeah.
Yes. Now that I live in the
South Carolina. Yeah. Now I know. Yeah.
Yes. I'm in Tennessee. I know it well. Yeah. I know it well. So, one thing you spoke about quite a lot in the book and something, so I have a presentation I do called the ROI of nice, and it's about 3 S's. It's about self, the stakeholders in your life and your organization and society, and how to kind of give back and be nicer. Starting with yourself, of course. And you wrote in the book quite a lot about personality assessments, and it's something that I find has been incredibly helpful. I've got them pinned up above my desk. Tell me a little bit about how you maybe first discovered personality assessments, and sort of how you settled on, because you wrote, I'm not even familiar of the Highlands Ability Battery. Yeah. That was one I wasn't even familiar with. So how did you first come across personality assessments, and then how did you?
So the reason I included those in this is what I call, this is where doubt can be the gift. The gift of doubt is it could mean you're broken, and there's a lot of tools for us to be helped by, but it could mean that you're invites you into that place of looking internally, where we're told not to look at, those feelings are subjective and you're not supposed to look internally, just look to the hard facts. Well, as leaders, we have to push beyond that, because there's so much more of who we are, and we need to blossom into the leaders that we truly are, as opposed to some weird caricature or twisting ourselves into a pretzel to try to be like somebody else. We get to be ourselves, in the context of what the work that we're trying to do and the limitations that we have. So that is why, and assessments are often either figuring out your core values or going through assessments can be the two most typical entry points into quadrant 3 that I find with my clients. The reason I'm into them, though, is I grew up in a really weird family where I had schoolwork because I was a student, and then I had Pitman family homework because I was a Pitman.
Right.
My parents were in a sales organization, and they were learning stuff about influeing people and goal setting that they had never learned, and they couldn't figure out why weren't we taught this in school. So I read Dale Carnegie, I read Norman Vincent Peale, listened to Florence Littauer speak on the 4 personality types, just all of Frank Bettger's How I Raised Myself from Failure to Success in Selling, all the goal setting books, Charlie Tremendous Jones, Life is Tremendous. And, so I just learned to love assessments. I figure, I want to be the best me I can be. And part of that is for me, the way I've seen that is taking these assessments and just seeing what they say about me and, eating the chicken, spitting out the bones, not letting them confine me to a constricted label, but to see where my limit, because one of the things I hated about, early life was the limitations, like early career stuff. There were limitations, but as I grew, when I wrote my first mission statement in my 20s, I wrote that I added to it. I'm about my gifts and my strengths and my abilities. But then, later in my 20s, I wrote, and my limitations, because it's in the limitations where we're able to invite our team in. We're able to invite other people to fill in the gaps. And, we're not autonomous. We are not all knowing, all powerful. And so in our cracks and in our shortcomings and our limitations can be the place where we can actually provide a lot of service by letting other people flourish. So that's why they're in there. The things I think that was really fun I've found over the 18 years of being a certified Franklin Covey coach is the ways that you can use these assessments together. So most of us know the behavioral assessment, which is, I talk about hardwiring as being ability, behavioral, and motivation. And most of the stuff that we know is behavioral. A DISC is the one that I happen to use, the 4 personality, 4 quadrants, DIS and C, sanguine, caloric, melancholy, phlegmatic. It's been around since the ancient Greeks. It's observable and it's really can be helpful for teams. But the Highlands is the ability one. So if you take a lot of these assessments, you can spin the questions. You kind of get where they're going with the question. With the Highlands ability battery, it's 3 hours of seemingly meaningless tasks you have to do under time pressure. There is no fooling the system. The first strengths are introvert, extrovert, and that's the only one that has the kind of this typical assessment questions. The other 18 strengths that it pulls out are tasks that, looking at pictures and seeing what's removed, looking at, scrambled numbers and making them associate with a word, and just weird things that you probably could do if you had enough time, but that's the point. You don't. And so it feels much more objective to me when I took it 20 years ago. A life coach suggested that I take this, and it really brought into sharp focus particularly some of the stressors in my life. There are certain stressors that are just, you don't know why they're there, but you're feeling stressed and you can't put your finger on it. I have found that often there are 5 strengths that need to be expressed if they're above a certain press point, and the Highlands pulls those out. But it also shows you how you learn. There are 5 different learning channels it tests, even though we only do 2 in our schools, listening and reading. It has a full 5. And so there's a lot of different, one of the learning channels is rhythm memory. I'm not necessarily good at playing drums, but I'm good at kinesthetic learning, and people that are high in rhythm memory also are good at moving. So I knew as I navigated my career, I did not want to be chained to a desk. Because that would probably not be a low stress place for me. It would probably be less stress for me to be constantly moving and traveling and going to places I've never been, speaking on stages I've never been to before, than to be chained and confined to a desk. So the Highlands was really, yeah. So that's kind of what you can do quickly. And what I love about it, Dave, is it allows you to build out more time. If you know something's going to take you more time, and even if you feel embarrassed about it, one of the things that showed for me was, notes were going to take a lot of, like, paperwork is not my strong suit. So I have to block Thursday mornings to try to work through contracts and invoices, just because it takes a stupid, ridiculous long amount of time, but these are the ones that I have to do. I can't just put it to my bookkeeper. When I was working at a nonprofit, we had board meetings, and every board meeting started with the approval of the minutes of the previous meeting. My secretary did not do my board secretary did not do the minutes. I don't know why he didn't, but he didn't. And so I knew that after the 45 to 60 minute meeting that we did, I had to block the next 3 to 4 hours to actually type out the minutes, because if I didn't do them while they're fresh, I would not do them. So, and we would, it was just awful. It was a lot more stressful to do them later. So it helps you adapt your environment to fit yourself better within the confines of what your objectives are. I still had to do the stuff I didn't like to do. We all do. But that's why one of the reasons I love assessments is that it helps give you language to articulate that in ways that, other than, I don't feel like it. That doesn't usually pass a lot of muster in most professional settings.
Well, and I think a lot of time with assessments is they really confirm what our strengths are. Like we know oftentimes what our strengths are, but they're just, we know it in our, like as soon as we see the results of, many of these acclaimed personality assessments, is you once you go through the results, you're like, oh yeah, this totally makes sense. But oftentimes I think for whatever reason, maybe any ideas why we sort of bury those strengths? Or
well, part of the thing is I think we're told we're trained through schooling and sports and early jobs to look at our weaknesses and how to bring those up, how to build those up. Well, yeah, you get an 80, but what about the other 20 points? You get a 97, what about the other 3 points? Or you excel in these areas, but you really need to bring up your writing so that you can get into college or whatever, whatever it is. Yeah. So I think we're trained, or our culture trains us to look at our weaknesses. And often I don't think there's a celebration of just being all we can be. There's a lot of talk to it. There's a lot of, participation trophies and stuff. But it's not really the sheer freedom of being able to express who we are within the context of a team moving something forward, a business creating, great service or products for customers. That still feels like we're cheating if we enjoy it too much. It feels like it's not really work if it doesn't hurt. So I think that could be part of it. What we do have to be careful of is confirmation bias. We can always take any of these tests. Many of these tests aren't scientifically rigorous and don't amount to much more than, what Disney princess are you? A BuzzFeed sort of test. Right. Which can be can help also. So I think it's holding them in their proper space and then getting that, having some trusted people that can verify that with you as well. Because, here's a great example. Outside of Georgia, I was doing this training and I was including DISC in it. And I love having people move to the quadrants of the room. I just moved the whole room. I've done it with almost 1,000 people in the room once. I get them all to move into the quadrants in a really fun way, engaging way. And I had a high D, somebody who's task oriented, dominant, really very driven, say to me afterwards, well, this was all very interesting, Mark. I know I'm a high D, I'm very task, but I happen to be very social as well. So I think the methodology is a little flawed because I happen to be not only really that dominant kind of bulldozer type, but I'm also really good with people. And because I had the mic, I chuckled and said, you may think that, but you might want to ask your team. And then I moved on. And it was really funny because after the session, and I had seen the guy already, so I knew he wasn't good with people just from our time together in the training. Yeah. But afterwards, each of his team members came to me afterwards and said, "Thank you so much," because he's not. He really thinks he is, but he just is good at running over us. He's not good at working with us or collaborating.
That's amazing.
So you have to take it with a grain of salt. But I think that StrengthsFinder is one that has been helpful for me. I'm not certified in it, so I don't teach about it, but it was really helpful to see some of my common themes and to realize, oh, that's why I feel this sense of completeness with today, because I spent the whole day learning something new. Yeah. And for me, that's something that I really kind of groove on. I need to always be learning something new. And that it's just, and it's usually a good confirmation of, where I need to grow too. Oh, all right. I didn't learn anything new today because I was just doing the stuff, but that's good because I have stuff to do.
Right. And also finding, I think, outsourcing or finding other team members or whomever who are talented at your quote unquote weaknesses, but that can pick it up where you're not able to, Absolutely. As a solopreneur, I tend to think I'm the only one that can do the stuff that I do, because I'm the only one that cares as much in part, but it's not true. And as I've hired a bookkeeper and now hired someone to do some of there's mechanistic stuff that I was doing with my membership society that she's able to do on a regular basis. And my wife has picked up the stuff that takes a little bit more executive decision making, and she's awesome at that. Mm-hmm. And then the most recent thing probably the nicest thing recently I have offloaded is a bulk of my social media updating. I'm very good on social media, but it was taking me 4 hours to do the maintenance social media stuff of this is the next training, this is the next call, stuff that was just rote. And somebody stepped in and I've brought her on, and she's adding a whole nother level of expertise with the graphics and all that I just didn't have. So I think it's one of those things of why didn't I do this earlier? Right.
This frees me up to do so much more cool stuff.
Yeah. And I think that's a big finding from doing these personality assessments. It is tapping into your strengths and where you're weaker, and realizing that, yeah, once you do this, you see the results. And that's when you have that realization that, wait a minute, I should outsource this, or I should get somebody to help me with this at least, or something like that. You mentioned that you're more extroverted. I too am extroverted. And there was actually just an article, a study, published. I just shared it on social yesterday or a couple days ago. I don't have it in front of me, but it was about, the findings that extroverts are, having a hell of a time with this pandemic. Go figure. And it's amazing because, I wrote about in my book and New Business Networking and on my blogs and I write a lot about introverts and I'm not an introvert, but I've talked to plenty of introverts, and my wife is one, about, networking effectively as an introvert and communication skills and things, and finding that, it's an especially tough time right now, because if you are more extroverted, well, the introverts are in their happiest place because they don't have to go to all these events.
Except that they're stuck with all the extroverts.
Well, if they live with one, that's a different story. Yeah. Yeah. I'm curious what the divorce rate is after COVID.
It's that whole thing. I'm living the dream.
Yeah.
It's a nightmare, but it's still a dream.
But a lot of society make, and rightfully so, focus on introverts and think, what can I do to help introverts and things like that. But I think now the introverts are in their happy place and the extroverts are not happy, and there's no one to support them. There needs to be like an extrovert support group just for extroverts. I don't know.
I've seen an introvert clubhouse room, which cracked me up because who would want to talk? But part of what I love about the assessments too is that it gives me a format or a forum to be able to share, to really build up. Introverts are really brought down in or devalued in our culture.
Yeah. And
so to be able to bring them up and be able to show how they can be strong leaders without having to be the outgoing, gregarious, walk around the office type person.
Right.
So that's a huge part of it. For me, I've had to just kind of rechannel. One of the things that the extroverts I learned from Highlands was that if you're not stimulated by new people, you'll stimulate yourself with other things, usually food. And so, just going for a car drive, has been something that going to someplace I haven't known, not necessarily getting out in pandemic, but, that has been something that's been new for me. I brew my own beer too. So there's always a new aspect of, the way I'm mixing the ingredients and the way I'm putting together the equipment. So I tried to do a few certain things that are new, that even though they're not cocktail parties and, winning over others that I've never met before.
Right. Well, I find that, and one thing with eating, something that I have done a fair amount of is, something I've learned recently is that your brain doesn't know whether you're hungry or thirsty. And that 9 times out of 10, you're actually thirsty. And also that if you are drinking water, presumably when you are thirsty, you've already been thirsty too long. So even when you're not craving water or, something like that, if you're not craving a drink, chances are you are thirsty. And if you're feeling peckish, if you go and have some water, it'll actually, tie you over. And so that's something I learned recently that I'm like, oh,
that's
okay.
Cool.
I need to be doing that.
Yeah. Cause I don't want to have the COVID-19 stay with me forever.
Right. Yeah.
Freshman 15 or freshman 5 in the COVID-19.
Exactly. Yeah. All right. So let's move on to the lightning round. Complete this sentence. Nice guys finish and gals finish
happily.
Nice. What's a nice book you recommend to the nice makers?
Oh,
not your own.
I like Bob Burg's From Adversaries to Allies. I think that's Winning Without Intimidation is the way I heard it first. I think that's a really good one.
Yeah, and Bob's great too. How is Marc Pitman nice to himself?
That is the hardest question. I ask my coaching clients too. How do you celebrate? What do you do to pat yourself on the back? For me, I think what has happened since the pandemic has been a doubling down, which sounds odd, on centering prayer or mindfulness routine, and giving myself credit for sitting in a chair for 20 minutes and doing that kind of exercise. And I found it has built a lot more capacity in my life for the people that are most important to me. I'm a lot more resilient or softer in my approach to them than I would be if my brain were soaked in cortisol. So I am nice to myself by doing centering prayer on a more consistent basis. I won't call it consistent yet, but more consistent.
So you mentioned this is similar to mindfulness in that, are you actually sitting quietly praying to yourself, or are you sitting quietly?
I do think I am a god, but
well, no, not to yourself in that way, to the God. But like, because I've been practicing mindfulness and meditation for real, like steadily for about a year and a half. And, I've dabbled over the years, but I find that, man, one of the tough, like guided meditation is one thing, but sitting by myself for like 20 minutes I have a heck of a time, because I start thinking of like all the things I need to do and the steps that I need to do. And like, I'll open my eyes and look at the clock and it's been like 3 minutes. And I'll be like, oh my gosh, I got to get back to this.
Part of in college, one of the things I knew as an extrovert because my wiring, even in college, I was aware that I needed to learn to be comfortable not around other people. Like I needed that. I have a strength and I have an ability, but I also had to be good with the yin and the yang, I guess. So I had studied centering prayer with a book called Centering Prayer, Catholic priest, Father, Basil Pennington wrote. And so for me, and I'm a head type too. I'm always in my head. So the, guided meditations, I need to re-explore, but for a while they really felt like, two things were happening. One was, I don't know where they're going, and that doesn't make me feel safe. Like, what are they trying to sell me something? Are they trying to manipulate me? Is this just, it wasn't necessarily a safe feeling. But the other part was with Basil Pennington's, image that he gave in the book, that the one I took away was, you're in a deep river and your goal is to sink down to the center stream, the undertow, and connect with the current that's going on there. And there are all these, water skiers and jet skiers and people fishing on the top of the river. And those are the thoughts that come in. And so they're trying to lure you up, like they're trying to hook you up and bring you back to the surface. And you just can look at them non-judgmentally and say, well, that's interesting. And then center back down. And so it's always been within a Christian tradition that I've done these. But yes, for me, I did Headspace, all the pro levels of Headspace, and the fact that whatever the guy's name is would talk in the beginning was sort of like, could you just stop? Now I'm appreciative of it because I'm using, I think it's Insight Timer. I don't know. I'm using something else. And, I love I talk in my head all the time. So I love the freedom to just let it go.
Yeah.
Just let it go.
Yeah. No, I love that.
That's not what I'm here for. Yeah.
I'll have to talk to my dad and see if he has a copy of that because he was a Catholic priest.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Basil Pennington. And there's another gentleman who does a lot of good, mindfulness and meditation, mystical stuff. That was, a partner of his. I just saw some YouTube things on, when I Googled Basil Pennington, this other guy came up and there were some really good teachings there.
That's great. Well, so I've got a final lightning round question.
One other thing that I'm doing that may be simpler, because 20 minutes is a marathon for most of us. Yeah. The other thing I learned from another Catholic priest, Richard Rohr, was the idea of engaging the neuroplasticity in our brains of whatever catches wonder, just staring at it for 15 seconds. Counting to a slow 15. And for me, it's the moon. It tends to be the moon and the stars right through our window. It even happened this morning. I looked up and there was this beautiful crescent moon. And so I just have timed myself to wait for a slow count of 15 and just be filled with that awe and the wonder that whatever it is that inspires awe and wonder in you, press into that for 12 to 15 seconds. So, and that's been incredibly nice to myself as well.
Yeah, I love that. That's awesome. Before we go, and I do have one last question, but cool. I do want to ask you also about your top 100 magnet goals. Not your top goals, but that would be a long list. But you have in your book a lot of activities, and that's one thing I really, really like about it. And the magnet goals was something that really stood out to me. I will admit I'm still at 10. And so I need to get back at it. And you even warned me in the book, like you warned the reader, you're like, you're going to do the first 10 and then you're going to get, squirrel, or you're going to be distracted by life. And it might be difficult to get back at it. Tell us just very quickly about that, about what that is. And of course, I encourage everyone to buy the book.
Because I grew up with all these different goal setting programs, I kind of matched together my own, what worked for me. Many of them don't work. There are certain parts of systems would work. So I put together my own, called it Magnet Goals, built it. It was the first product that I launched when I started my coaching program, and quickly found out nobody wants to set goals. They want to complete them. So I've used, but it's something I've used with my coaching clients going forward and then put it in trainings. And the first step that Dave's referring to is listing out 100 things that you want to do. Dreams, hopes, goals, tasks even. We can get really nerdy about, is it a task? Is it a goal? Is it a dream? Is it a superstition, or is it a vision, a fantasy? Forcing you to forcing myself to fill in 100 spots lets me free of that. And I can just put everything in there. I can put everything from, my income goal for the year to being interviewed positively by Oprah. There's all, which is like a fantasy. I don't know that any connection to her yet,
right?
But I can keep it in there. And as I've done it with intensives, pre-pandemic, people would come into Greenville and work a whole day on these quadrant 3 things. And it's been amazing to see how forcing people to the pressure of filling 100 spots allows you to reintroduce your humanity to your goal setting. It's not just your tasks that you have to do. It's a part of who you are. It's the hopes and dreams that you have, the hobbies that you'd forgotten that you like doing. And people, again, that guilt feeling of, Mark, is it okay if I put this on my list? Because it's not really work related. And I'll, look at them and kind of grin and say, yeah, it's your list, list. So yeah, fill it in with whatever you want.
Right.
And so those don't become your, so if anybody else is listening and they're, schooled in goals, there's no way you could focus on all 100. So the process helps you limit it down to 3 to 5. But the amazing thing with 100 is if you just wrote a list of 100 things you want to do in the year and put it in a drawer, you'd be shocked at how many things get accomplished. I had one of my friends, that you may know, John Swanson, did, I think it got to maybe 8 or 9, and because he just doesn't think that way. And he got really frustrated with the process. And then about 3 years later, he pulled out the list. He found the list again. And by 9, he was going really fanciful. By 8 and 9, there were 2 things on his list that were just like way beyond whatever he thought he could ever do and would be real. Wow. And 3 years later, he looked at it and he realized the last 2 years of his life had been lived in those 2 spots. Which were like, he had actually adapted. So I think there's something pretty powerful about human beings that we are, goals. I think it was Maxwell Maltz that called us goal seeking. They're heat seeking missiles, but we're goal seeking individual people. We have an inner compass that orients around goals. And when we write them down, we start a process in motion that even if we're not aware of it continues, which is really cool.
Yeah. And I've gone through some of my old journals recently.
What a great process.
And I used to bitch and complain about lots, in my journals. And so going back to the 90s when I was living in Ireland, Heather and I had just started seeing each other, and she had to go home for a summer, and I was wondering whether she'd come back. And so I was miserable. And so I wrote about, the common themes in my journal were about hangovers and why I should stop drinking. The fact that I was so broke, like really broke. The fact that I couldn't even afford cigarettes back then. And then the fact that Heather left me, and then, or not left me, but left, Ireland. And then I had no idea at the time that we would end up being married, let alone see each other again. But, I'm now over 20 years without a cigarette or a drag. I'm a year, 300 days today without beer or without alcohol.
Wow.
Yeah. And I'm happy. And like, I realized like, oh, wait a minute. Like, so I think journaling and writing down these goals, like you've illustrated really well in the book, is just a fantastic idea. All right. Last question. If you had a billboard, what would it say?
Oh, life's short, live passionately.
I love it, Mark.
That's been my motto for years. Yeah.
I love it. I love
Thank you.
So, how can people get a hold of you and find your book too?
Yeah. You could Google Marc with a C, Pitman with 1 T. And if I've done my job well in the last 20 years, you'll find me. Conquer Leadership Group is where the leadership stuff is housed. The Magnet Goals is there. It's also included in the book. And The Surprising Gift of Doubt is available in all fine stores where books are sold, or can be ordered by them too.
Yes. And it is really a great book. I loved it. So thank you for spending some time with us.
Well, thanks for having me on. It's been really nice.
Thanks for listening to the Nice Podcast. Theme music provided by Alistair Crystal at alistaircrystal.ca. Hey, if you enjoyed the conversation, please take a moment to leave us a review. The links are in the description. I'll have more of that soon. Did you know that new subscribers of the Nice Maker email newsletter receive a free copy of my little ebook, Improve with Improv? Each Friday, I share nice stories, tools, tips, and much more, and you can grab it now from nicemaker.co or by clicking the link in the episode description. I'm Dave Delaney. Take care and be nice.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Gordon Glenister hosts an outstanding podcast called the Influence Global Podcast. Gordon, tell these fine folks what they're going to get when they listen.
We interview some amazing people from all around the world, whether they be influencers, content creators, brands, influencer platforms, anybody involved in the influencer industry. There's some fantastic guests that make a fine listen for you. You can find them on marketingpodcasts.net, or you can also find them on my own website, which is www.gordonglenister.com.
Or, of course, wherever you get your podcasts.